Welcome to Education Forum. I'm Herman Badillo, Chairman of the Board of Trustees of the City University. The improvement of education affects all New Yorkers. This program will focus on the key educational issues and challenges before us all. My guest today is Dr. Charlotte Frank, who is a member of the Board of Regents of the state of New York. She is a graduate of City College, received a master's degree from Hunter College, and a PhD in education from NYU. She is also very well schooled in education because for many years she was the director of the Division of Curriculum at the Board of Education, and now she is a vice president at McGraw-Hill Foundation Education and Publishing Group. So that whole career really has been in the area of education, and now she has the responsibility to evaluate it from the point of view of the Board of Regents. And tell us, what exactly is the Board of Regents?
Well, the Board of Regents is a group of 16 people who represent different districts, different judicial districts, and some are members at large, and they are the policymakers for New York State, for New York State.
They're the ultimate authority in education.
Well, and what they do is, yes, and they, in fact, it goes back to the 1780s. In fact, I think the first regent was Alexander Hamilton, and it is designed, New York State has this group to establish policy. What are the issues that should be addressed in a number of areas? And the regents, we've talked about it, when I was a kid, I only thought it was a test. And then I suddenly found out when I became a teacher that a regent is also a human being. And with responsibilities for the professions, for the libraries throughout New York State, for the cultural institutions, and I guess the thing that we're going to really talk about is really education.
That's right. You handle CPAs. I'm a CPA and a lawyer, and we have to get approval from you.
That's right.
But right now, we're back to the regents, everybody thinking that the regents is a test because the regents have set new standards, and you will be requiring that every high school graduate pass the regents exam. And there are a lot of complaints about that, and a lot of people are saying that that cannot happen. What's your reaction to that?
Well, you really have to have a belief that kids can do it, and you have to have a sense of high expectations. This has been going on for years and years and years, and in fact, back in 1970, only 50% of the kids ever graduated from high school. Now, now we're up to 70%, but the thing is, we want the quality to be greater. And in this society in which information and it is so necessary for the young people to have successful lives, to be good citizens. The whole environment has changed in this global arena. So what the regents have said is, yes, we expect our young people to perform, to have high expectations, and there is an assessment in the 4th grade, in the 8th grade. So it doesn't just happen when you're ready to graduate from high school. You start looking at this and preparing for this from from preschool on.
But they won't be able to graduate from high school unless they pass the regents exam, right?
Correct.
And when will that take effect?
Well, it starts right now. I mean, they're going to have to pass right now we have to pass the English language arts. But you have to go back. This is not a punishment.
No,
I know you know that, but there are people probably hearing and need to understand it. I mean, what you're saying is, I believe is a policy. I believe kids can do it. And what we have to do is have the capacity and create the capacity for young people to see that, yes, they can do it. And there are different ways that we can help young people pass the math tests, the science tests, the social studies tests.
Why didn't we have that requirement up to now? Because the problem is that we've had different kinds of high school diplomas. And as far as I know, in the city of New York, of all the people who graduate from high school, only 12% would get Regents diplomas now, and that is last year. Why didn't we institute this before?
Well, I think it probably wasn't, at least at that time, it wasn't perceived to be as necessary. But the job market has changed. Life has changed. If you look at the technology around us, that has changed. There are different expectations we have. And there's research to show that if you believe that our students, that young people can do it, then you're going to design systems that will help build the capability, develop the capacity for kids to do it, and for, then the teaching and learning to be a much more effective mode. It's like we know that in applied learning, there are kids who probably would never have been expected to pass Regents, go on to college. In fact, we've got some experience with a program called NAF, National Academy Foundation, in which there are academies of finance and travel and tourism, and now IT. And this started about 15 years ago, and this happens to be true when Sandy Weil was back at American Express. He wanted to give something back to the city, and he said, and the jobs aren't on the waterfront anymore. They're in finance, insurance, and real estate. This is New York. And so an academy was developed with curriculum, with all of the academic areas, with these themes infused. And it was started in one high school in New York City. It has now grown to over 300 high schools throughout the country. But in fact, he will always say, that was his first failure, because he thought the kids that would graduate would go right to get a job, because that was expected of them. And what we found out, that these kids, because they had job experiences during the summer, and because suddenly the science courses had some meaning to them, like if they were going to invest in Pfizer, Merck, why would they do that? They would have to know what the products are. So you would have some sense of chemistry and biology. At any rate, every one of those students passed all the rigorous exams, and 95% went on to college.
Listen, nobody would be happier than me to see all of these students graduating with a Regents degree from high school. But the problem I now have as chairman of the board of CUNY is that in community colleges, for example, 87% of the students who are high school graduates from New York City cannot pass 3 simple tests in reading, writing, and arithmetic. Now, that pretty much corresponds to what Judge DeGrasse said in his opinion, that only 12% get a Regents exam. So that means we have a very long way to go.
We do, and what I have seen, because I wasn't part of the original design of the policy, but it's something I support. And there really has to be this recognition that the kids will do that. And what you have is they built a safety net of 55, not 65.
That is a passing mark.
Yes. So there is some recognition that there's going to have to be a time in which before you launch the entire effort. So there is a sensitivity to that, and there's a constant looking at it and re-examining of it.
But yet just recently we saw an announcement that said that this year and last year, the dropout rate from high school increased, so that instead of the dropout rate decreasing, it's been going the other way in New York City.
Well, I guess we're looking at that data too, and because what some of them are doing are going on to GEDs. So there are alternatives, but we're not looking for that.
But the GED is not the Regents diploma, certainly.
No, you're right, but it is a diploma, and that's not something that we're advocating. What we're saying is, and we're looking at, like Justice DeGrasse, that decision for the Campaign for Fiscal Equity. Remember I said we have to build equity, we have to build capability. Some of the things we have to say is, now how much can we do and what's stopping us? And so what one has to look at the leadership in schools.
Okay, now let's talk about Judge DeGrasse, because what he said was even more fundamental. He said that the New York State Constitution requires that there be a sound basic education. So he didn't put it on the basis of just the right thing to do. He said now it's a constitutional requirement.
Absolutely, and that was the piece that has been enforced. And in order to do that, what Justice DeGrasse said is that obviously we have been shortchanged. you know, and I represent the city, I represent Manhattan, but we have been shortchanged when you look at the resources that are available. I mean, very clearly, we have about 37% of the student population, and we're not getting the same amount of money being allocated by the state. We've got a higher percentage of English language learners who have more needs. We have a higher percentage of special ed kids who have needs. And Justice DeGrasse has tied his decision onto, in the relationship to the Regents' learning standards.
Okay, but he also said that you have to change the school aid formula to New York City, and you have to change it in a very dramatic way. Well over $1 billion. And that is a very big amount to expect the legislature to approve. And the difficulty is that you and the Board of Regents, you were appointed by the state legislature. So that, do you think that the legislature will support the idea that you have and Judge DeGrasse has, that we have to provide that much money?
Ultimately, I think that they're going to have to see it. You're absolutely right in bringing up the Constitution, because I don't think people realize it goes back to that, to this commitment and responsibility of a sound basic education. One would just need to go walk into the schools in New York City and look at schoolyards, look at places where there are no schoolyards because there are Quonset huts all over the place. There isn't a place for a 5- and 6-year-old to play. Take a look at what's missing in the arts. Take a look at what's missing in the libraries. Take a look at what's missing in the science labs. You need to have the resources so that kids can be excited about it. I mean, we've got research to show that kids who come into school and they need because we've got this whole disparity, if you start disaggregating student population, there need to be different ways to excite kids, in ways in which, and the arts can do that. You can do that in, the performing and visual arts. You can make relationships to reading and writing. So you need to be able to say to a kid, this is a good place to be. And for so many of the parents of young children who have parents who were unsuccessful and now they have kids whom they think are going to be unsuccessful, we have to figure out how we get those parents in.
Let's talk more about this after these announcements.
You don't have to like me.
Or you can.
You don't have to run with me.
You really don't have to run away from me.
And we're not all that different.
I like good food. Good music. I want a good job.
I want my kids to live in a world
Where they are safe and loved
and respected for who they are.
You don't have to like me.
But if you talk to me,
you might.
we can end prejudice if we talk to each other. Call.
Tell us what you'd do.
Together we can build one America.
In America, you are not required to offer food to the hungry or shelter to the homeless. There is no ordinance forcing you to visit the lonely. In fact, nowhere in the Constitution does it say you have to provide anything for anybody. Thank you for all you've given. Imagine what more could do.
We're back today with Dr. Charlotte Frank, who's a member of the Board of Regents. We've been talking about Judge DeGrasse's opinion, who said that in order to provide a sound basic education for the school children of the city of New York, which the state constitution requires us to do, we have to have a tremendous increase in money, resources. But the governor has appealed that decision, and the appeal could take many years to be resolved. What do we do in the meantime in order to ensure that the children can meet the standards that the Board of Regents has set up?
Well, obviously, we're going to try and meet with the legislature and go up to Albany and try and fight for more money and have them recognize that this is what is needed.
Because that could be done, even if the governor appeals the decision. There's nothing in the appeal that prohibits the legislature from complying with the order of the judge, which was that the legislature come up with a program by September 15th. So they could do that.
Yes, as a matter of fact, that was one of Justice DeGrasse's recommendations. And so, yes, we're going to have to fight for more money and see how we do that, as you say, despite the appeal. But we're going to have to look at, if you still believe that, how can we reorganize those schools that are not working?
Yes, on that issue, there are approximately 100 schools in the city of New York that have been denominated as schools under Regents review, which is a fancy way for saying that the schools have been failing, that they've been failing not just for now, but for a number of years, and the Regents have reviewed these schools and said that something has to be done. And the problem is, and parents tell me, and I'm sure they tell you, that what is going to be done about those schools that are failing?
Well, what you're going to find is that once you have to identify it, and you have to be able to say, as the Regents have done, this is enough. We're not going to allow this thing to happen anymore. And we know that changes have to take place. So that the chancellor has a chancellor's district. There are and my understanding is that the UFT has just come out with the AFT has come out with a resolution to take another look about how teachers are supported, what kinds of resources are given to them, financial differences. And what you need to say is, because what we know when we look at the data, most of the teachers who are in these poor performing schools are uncertified. They're brand new. They're ill-equipped. They're the newest principals. There aren't enough resources. So what has happened in the city, and Chancellor Levy is focusing in on these SIR schools and providing different kinds of resources, and you are helping, as the city university.
No, we have set up a dean for teacher training because I was appalled to find that we were graduating students who could not pass the teacher's exam in English. And then those individuals became uncertified teachers teaching our children in the schools, which I think is totally unacceptable.
Well, there was once a time, if we're talking about capacity building, for the kids to have the capacity, we have to look at the teachers who have the capacity. And so addressing that and making certain that the teachers pass certain exams, that they have the content that they know the content so that they're able to design instructional programs. This is not new. I would say 15, 20 years ago, I was once teaching a course. At that time, it was Uptown Hunter to early childhood teachers. And this was a master's level course, and I gave these teachers, the 5th grade at that time, the Metropolitan Achievement Test. This was the first day. I just wanted to get a sense about the lay of the land. Mm-hmm. All but one would have failed the test. But that was a time when math wasn't required when the teachers went through school. You cannot teach what you do not know. And I said to these wonderful people, I said, you're the ones that are preparing these kids to that.
And what level was the Metropolitan Achievement Test?
That time it was the 5th grade.
Yeah, well, that's the reason that I've changed the standards at CUNY in order to ensure that at the 4-year colleges, nobody gets matriculated unless they can pass the basic test, because we found that there were students who were coming in some cases in substantial numbers, who couldn't pass simple tests, and some even graduated.
All right, so what's happening now? You're doing that at CUNY. The Regents are saying, hold it. This is enough. The kids aren't going to go through. We're not going to allow these failing schools to continue. It just got to stop. The resources have to be there. So you have higher ed, CUNY system working collaboratively. You've got you've got private, the private schools also working collaboratively in higher ed. And you're saying, all right, so now we're going to build capacity. We're going to do different kinds of training during the summer. We're going to provide leadership for principals, because if you're going to change a system in a school, you've got to look at a principal who understands how to create the climate. I mean, there's data to show, comes out of effective schools, that in order to, when you're looking at a school that really is better, and you compare that to a similar kind of a school with the same student population, when you disaggregate the data, what you find is that the principal is an instructional leader. What you find is that parents are involved. How do you get the parents in, especially when you've got this divide But they'll come in if they see that there's value there and there's a focus in on the basics and teacher education.
Well, you were director of curriculum for many years at the Board of Education. What do you think of the curriculum now at the board?
Well, as a matter of fact, there is I'm not that close to it, but there is a math commission, and I'm sitting, and that's being chaired by Matthew Goldstein.
Yes, he's a statistician by
yes,
profession.
Yes, and in my first life, I was a BBA in statistics and economics. That's when I graduated from Baruch and became a math teacher. And so what we see is that the city standards pretty much match the state standards and are pretty close. They're good for the national standards in mathematics. I'll take that for example because that's what we've been focusing in on. The resources are pretty much there. What is not there is the professional development.
Which means what?
Which means, all right, fancy words, which means teachers being able to do that. See, it's one thing for me to even know that. Now, how do I do that? How do I design a system that helps teachers teach this in a way?
Well, the first step, it seems to me, is you have to have teachers who majored in math when they were getting teacher training, because one of the problems in the past has been that you can be a teacher and teach a given subject like math, even if you majored in English, for example.
Yeah, they're teaching out of license. Yeah. No, you're right. It's a class. You cannot teach what you do not know.
Right.
So whatever you're looking at the universities. The universities now are saying to the schools of arts and sciences, we need to have the talent there to work with our schools of education.
Well, do we have enough teachers, sticking to the question of mathematics, do we have enough teachers
at this moment now
who are trained in math?
To this moment, do we have enough in math and science? No.
So how do we meet that gap?
Well, if one looks at the paper, what I'm seeing is Chancellor Levy has all kinds of ads out there, and he is attracting people who are mid-career changes, people who pursued other careers because they didn't think they wanted to be teachers. And so, I mean, I saw people who reflected what I just described in programs this summer, and they were much more knowledgeable because they came into this with a body of knowledge, with a body of understanding that was then enhanced by the support they had this summer.
Well, you were a professional educator. Do you believe that you can take someone who has been conducting another career, let's say a CPA, because I'm a CPA, and then the person decides that maybe they'd like to be teachers, and have them within a short period of time become teachers?
Overnight, no. However, what we're finding is that there are mentors that are accompanying these new teachers into their schools. And it's taken a while to do that. But what some of these people also bring is they bring an understanding of other careers. So sometimes what you're teaching in math and science is when you have, we talked about it before, an application into other areas. So if a guy comes in from construction, if a woman, if anybody comes in from another area, they have been using mathematics and science in ways in which that bear understanding for young people. So very often what is now being said to these folks, think about experiences that you had. Look at the room. I mean, we had a talk about with construction workers and engineers and architects who are coming back. Take a look at the room, even the room that you're sitting in your classroom. What are the geometric shapes? How do they compare? How do they contrast? So then you're having teachers who have a body of knowledge because they've had different experiences, share that with young people to help, well, why am I studying this? Oh, so there's a light at the end of the tunnel. I now can make this relationship. If one loves baseball and you're thinking of batting averages, what is a batting average? If you think of it, it's really a percentage.
Sure, of course.
And if somebody hits another ball, and I wish I knew all the names, I can go back to Joe DeMatt, but I wish I knew some of the more common names. But if I took the newspaper and showed them, and we talked about the sports pages, they have an understanding.
Oh, no,
So
listen,
suddenly, yes, so
there's no doubt in my mind that the kids can learn. The question is, how do we do it, not just for individual kids, but how do we do it on a mass basis?
On a mass basis, so there is, on a mass basis, what there is there are mentors, there is supports, there is saying, make the content, the academic areas have a little bit more personal feeling to it, and that's going on in the schools, and good content is coming from the schools of liberal arts and sciences, and you're finding that. You're also finding that corporations are getting involved and volunteering and going into schools, and there are kids and teachers who are visiting corporations now. Yeah. I know that our Business Week people are working with folks at Murray Bertram High School. I know that our Business Week Online is working with Morris High School. So when the kids come down there, in fact, they once attended an annual shareholders meeting.
Good. Well, maybe that will work, but unfortunately, we're out of time. Thanks for coming.
Thank you for inviting me.
You can reach us by email at our website, www.cuny.tv, or write to us at CUNY TV, 365 Fifth Avenue, New York, New York, 10016.